Special Saturday episode of the Big Go Boat podcast. This is Two James here along with my fellow co-host Jamal. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on?
And if we're doing something on Saturday, that means it's got to be a special show, a special occasion, and that means we must have a special guest. Today, we have one of the baddest guys on the indie scenes, one of the baddest guys at Nova Pro, constantly working. I mean, literally, if you're friends with this guy on Facebook, like he does nothing but train every single day. It's either him training, sparring, running. He lives, sleep, and dream this stuff. We have John Kermon, the Kermonator, on the show today. What's up, man?
Not much, man. How are you guys doing?
Oh, chilling.
Okay.
Good Saturday, how about yourself?
I'm pretty good. Just hanging out on Saturday night, talking to you guys. Always going to be a good time. I know that.
My man, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and with everything that's just going on in your life and career, I figured this was no better time to pull the trigger and let's get on air and let's get this going. So we're finally here and we're gonna do the thing. First of all, where are you actually calling from right now? Because my guts is telling me you might be in the gym right now.
Nah. Saturday, I only work out one time a day, so I got that out of the way this morning. I'm just hanging out with my home in Washington, D.C. right now.
I hear that. So on the contrary, how many times are you training a day?
It depends. Normally at least 2. Saturday is my kind of take it easy day. I only train one time. Other than that, it's some kind of skill work where I'm working on a martial art, whether it's striking or grappling, and then normally some kind of cardio-based thing.
I hear that. And yesterday, actually, I saw that you held a class for teaching Muay Thai.
Yeah, I teach Muay Thai as well. I also teach like kids jiu-jitsu, kids CrossFit. I've taught MMA classes before. I've kind of done it all.
Okay, because I was going to say, I know you build as a grappler. I mean, and it shows, but I saw that you was teaching Muay Thai. I was like, oh, you know Muay Thai too. So you're very much well rounded. So is there any form of martial arts that you're not familiar with? Maybe judo?
I mean, I don't know like taekwondo, karate, or any of those type of things.
Yeah.
Primarily just jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, because those are kind of the main things for MMA. I mean, I include boxing and wrestling kind of under those because they're part of it as well. But those are pretty much the only ones I know. I don't really know any of the other kind of stuff.
Okay.
Is there a type of martial art that you've seen that you want to get into, but it's just that we don't necessarily do it over here? I'm thinking of like Silat from Indonesia, or what's the thing, capoeira in Brazil.
Maybe judo. We don't really have judo at my gym. There's Maryland Capital MMA. They have judo there. So maybe if we had those at the one that I train at, that would be good too, just to kind of pick up an added dimension.
Is there any overlap between the different techniques and styles? Like, okay, well, if you know Taekwondo, then maybe judo may be a little bit easier. If you know judo, then maybe Wing Chun or something like that would be easier.
Yeah, if people know Taekwondo, it kind of makes it easier for them to pick up Muay Thai. They kind of understand like you have to stay in a particular way and there's particular ways to strike, more so than somebody who's done even just like boxing, because they might be really good with punches, but when it comes to kicking, they won't know how to do any of it. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yep. So I figured that we'll start off this show. Again, I mean, we already chimed into a little bit your MMA background, then venture into your wrestling background. And the reason is because if anybody doesn't know, I mean, this guy is a professional MMA fighter and is also an independent wrestler, and gives you the best of both worlds. Something that you've been in the game, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, since 2004, which is a long time. Where this type of hybrid athlete seems to be a thing that's this all of a sudden becoming very popular right now. I mean, I maybe became a MMA fan maybe late out the college, so around like 2010. been a wrestling fan a lot longer than that. And I know there was, profound people such as Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn. But, WWE and wrestling period never really paid homage to the fact of, their MMA background. But now you look at this new group of people, we could say people like Shayna Baszler or Bobby Lashley and even Brock Lesnar now that they're, they let it known that, hey, this guy is a collegiate wrestler, but also has a very extensive MMA background. Just wondering, how do you feel about that, being in the game so long? How do you feel about seeing the progress and just the dynamics of that all changing?
I like it, to be honest. I think it brings a lot of legitimacy. You know what I'm saying? People always talk about legitimacy in wrestling, but what's more legitimate than somebody who's gone and like beating people up for real, coming in and then doing wrestling too. And two is the thing of like, people are always like, oh, Brock Lesnar is so wild and crazy now since he came back, since he did MMA. Like when he busted Randy Orton opening that match, everybody was like, oh man, that was crazy. He was shooting on him and doing all this crazy stuff. So I think it's a good thing, and I think it's also we kind of bring a different dynamic at wrestling than a lot of other people can. And I think that's good too, because for a while people were all about the crazy moves and crazy dives, doing all this crazy stuff. But I think people are getting more into kind of the like actual wrestling based stuff, more now so than they were before. And it's also, I think, pushed a lot of people to kind of pursue different types of training. Like I know a lot of wrestlers who do CrossFit or like parkour, that kind of stuff, just because, to try to be a little more athletic.
Yeah.
Like people have done a lot of things before there's a period of time where I felt wrestling, you didn't see very many new moves. You didn't see a lot of different things, but I would say even in the last like 5 years or so, you've seen so many different matches and people and crazy spots come out. And it's pretty awesome, I think.
I couldn't agree more. So I know you have a very extensive amateur career. I mean, you picked up 2 significant wins in 2007 against James Hoffman and Joshua Oxendine. And then you recently just had your debut in your professional MMA career. And for anybody who doesn't know the difference, amateur martial arts, mixed martial arts matches are billed to be 3-minute rounds, and professional is 3 5-minute rounds. And so you debuted at Strike Off 11, which was in Virginia. And although the outcome may not have went the way you wanted it to go, I mean, you're a guy that shows a ton of resilience. I have to know next, what is next for you, or what have you learned from this experience? And could you talk about the dynamics of being in a traditional 3-3 and a 3-5?
I mean, it's just a lot more conditioning. I kind of knew that ahead of time. So that's why, like, I picked up my running a lot. Facebook has a Facebook memory thing. So sometimes I'll have runs pop up from a year ago and I'm like, wow, my time is so much slower and I did it so much more infrequently. So really that's the biggest thing. But if you know that, like you're knowledgeable of it and you think about it and plan for it ahead of time, it won't really be that much of a problem. Like I feel real great and in real good shape. And I'm looking for a fight right now. At the end of the year, there's not a whole lot going on. There's like only one card in December. By the time that I contacted them, it was already filled up. So I'm kind of looking towards the beginning of next year for my next one.
Awesome. So in other words, then, because I had no idea this, you also have to just like in independent wrestling, you also have to get your you also have to make your own bookings as well. I wasn't sure maybe that the promotions, there was maybe some ranking system or something that they had to go about or something within the area, but you're saying that you do have to go out to make your own bookings?
A lot of times it works one of 2 ways. Either you can contact a promotion that's having something, or sometimes they'll contact gyms and ask if there's any fighters of certain weight classes that are available to do fights on a certain date. Okay. But those are pretty much the main ways. I mean, there's the one local professional promotion. Obviously, they know the owner of my gym, so they'll hit him up whenever there's a card going on, see if there's anybody interested in doing anything.
Awesome. Jamal, you had something?
Yeah, really a question about, so if you're training for MMA and you're training for wrestling, and those are not exactly the same thing, and, since making your professional debut, are there elements to MMA that from wrestling that you have brought over, or are there, and vice versa? And more importantly, when you are in a wrestling capacity, how do you deal with the differences between different types of wrestlers? I mean, an MMA fighter, you kind of take what you can get, but the wrestling matches are, booked differently than an MMA match.
Yes. So I mean, I've brought a lot of stuff over from MMA to wrestling, I think. I actually prefer to wrestle more traditional pro wrestlers, because to me, the coolest thing that I can do is as far as incorporating the martial arts stuff, is come up with counters to kind of people's moves. So when I get in there with another guy who does MMA or does grappling, it's kind of like we do the same thing. So people are kind of watching what would probably happen if we were competing in a grappling match or in the gym or something, as opposed to maybe more of the traditional style pro wrestling match. So it kind of just depends on what you like. As far as how they go together, yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing I've brought from wrestling to MMA is the improvisational aspect of it. In wrestling, sometimes you got to improvise on the spot and be quick on your feet and quick to react and think. So that actually helped out with MMA as far as like, if I feel something, I have to just go for it, as opposed to maybe somebody who hasn't done either thing might stop and think for a second. And as far as from MMA to wrestling, I mean, like I said, I have different ways of doing counters to things and ending up in different spots or different holds with people than I think a lot of people even do, even some of the MMA guys in wrestling. And a lot of that probably has to do with my size. I'm kind of a smaller guy. So when I train jiu-jitsu in the gym, I have to do what I call small guy moves. So if these guys aren't doing the small guy moves, they don't really know how to do them. Or even incorporate them in the wrestling aspect of their careers or whatever. So I think that kind of gives me an advantage over them in that way.
Now, I remember when you started out in Nova Pro, and we saw a very traditional MMA match, and to be honest with you, as a person that's not a fan of MMA, I didn't know what to make of it, and I think that a lot of the crowd didn't know what to make of it. We came for a wrestling show, and a UFC show broke out, and you fast forward a year and a half later, you're definitely one of the main guys, one of the bigger draws in Nova Pro. Do you agree with the sentiment that the crowd was less responsive than normal for your more traditional MMA matches? And when do you think, if at all, that you turned the corner with the crowd?
Sorry, can you repeat the second part of that? I didn't quite hear it.
Okay. I said, when do you think, if you do think, when do you think you turned the corner with the crowd? You kind of started kind of slow with the traditional MMA in a wrestling setting, and the crowd wasn't particularly responsive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You turned that corner with the crowd, and at the point where now you're one of the bigger guys in Nova Pro.
For me, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think people just didn't really know what to make of it at first. Like I said, while there are people that have done MMA and wrestling, I just think that the style that I brought and the way I do things was a lot different from the way that they do it. I think I started to turn the corner really when kind of last year when Sanjay was in the feud with Logan. Me and Logan did a thing too. Logan took the guy's fake leg off and hit me with a fake leg. I don't know if you guys were watching the shows then.
Of course.
But Logan took the guy's fake leg off and hit me with it and pinned me, and we had a pretty wild match the next month. And I kind of think that's when people started kind of getting onto my side. And then just the matches that I had after that, I would say I delivered, again, just a lot of different things that people might not have seen before. And at that point, I think people were starting to also kind of understand what I was doing and who I was. And then just kind of like, I gained steam from there.
I got a response to this, but I'll get to it in just a little bit to this exact question. I just wanted to make sure I had something clarified first. Are you still building yourself at 145 and you are competing in the featherweight division?
Yeah, that's what I fight at.
And what's your natural weight?
It depends. It kind of fluctuates. Walking around, I'm normally closer to 165 than anything else.
Okay. And do you find cutting, which is considered? I mean, I don't know much about this, but I've heard plenty of people say that cutting weight is extremely dangerous, and I mean, that's about 20 pounds, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you find any challenges in this at all?
Nah, I've done it enough times now that like I know how to do it basically like a science. So it hasn't ever been a problem for me. Like I've never missed weight. I fought probably around 25 times. And I don't even know, like jiu-jitsu tournaments are weight based too. So I've cut for a couple of those as well. I don't know how many exactly, but I know what I'm doing at this point. Even to the point of this year, I don't know how many people even know this. This year, at the Commonwealth Cup, I had a fight the next night. So I weighed in before the Commonwealth Cup when I wrestled Tracy Williams.
Yeah.
And then did that 3-way later.
That's right.
And then I fought the next day.
Considering that you are a featherweight and in the UFC, I consider the featherweight to be one of the most interesting classes in there. I mean, you have some of the best and top fighters in the world in that division, come with like Max Holloway. I mean, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, and even Uriah Faber, who's one of my favorites of the past. Looking at that division right now, and looking at UFC and all, I mean, do you absolutely think that 145 is probably the most competitive weight class in MMA laterally, no matter what promotion it is?
I'd say yeah, it's one of them. I mean, there's, like you said, there's just so many guys there that could be title contenders. I mean, any of those guys could win a title fight at pretty much any time. It seems like a lot of the other divisions. Well, it kind of depends. It's a crazy time in UFC right now. There's been a lot of belt changes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people knocked off when it seemed like divisions were kind of locked down for a while, or people came around. So right now, I don't feel like there's any division that's not really that competitive.
Except for the flyweight.
Maybe heavyweight.
Flyweight.
Yeah, that's true. Demetrius Johnson. Nobody's ever going to beat him.
That dude's going to have to retire because nobody's beating that guy.
Yeah. Nah.
That's one of my best.
I like that, though.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I know, a lot of people don't like things like that. Like, people didn't like Anderson Silva and GSP and all that type of stuff, or how they won all the time. But you should appreciate, like, greatness when it's around. You know what I'm saying? That would be like hating on Jordan, and then when he retired, being like, oh, he's the greatest ever.
You bring up two names I was going to bring up next. But one other thing I was going to say, that's exactly why I like. I definitely like that, but at the same time, that's why I like the featherweight division, because it seems to be the division of the underdog. For every one champion there is, a next guy steps up and comes out of nowhere and scores a victory, and all of a sudden he's the top guy. Like, I'm a huge fan of Max Holloway, and I actually watched this fight while I was in Hawaii, and to be around that culture and see them embrace this guy is absolutely amazing. I bet. And to Demetrius Johnson, too, where Dana White didn't even want the flyweight to even be a thing, is also awesome that he took it, ran with it, and now he's just cannot be beat. So, you know.
I agree.
Speaking of Anderson Silva, and you're talking about one of the greats, I mean, this guy cannot can't piss clean for anything all of a sudden now. And he says his team is working really hard with the USDA on this. I mean, do you by any means feel like this tarnishes his legacy at all, considering that all the big guys are taking huge L's with the USDA?
Yeah, nah, I don't. I mean, even number one, like, for him, look at the guys he fought. how much bigger a lot of them were than he was. But it
Yeah.
didn't really make a difference just because he is who he is.
Yeah.
And like he's trained the way he's trained to get to where, I mean, he was all reaction based stuff, but it was all just so on point and lethal.
Yeah. Some of the most impressive fights of all time.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's just so awesome in the way that he would bait people into doing things was just amazing. And none of that was based off of steroids. So like it does suck, you know what I'm saying? But think about like, do people still talk about Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa and be like, oh, they're garbage? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yes, they do.
Some people might.
Sammy
But they might make a joke about steroids or things like that. But, you know, people forget those things over time, I think, and remember the better things.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to speak. I can't speak on the MMA, but as a baseball fan, one of the biggest debates as far as the end of career is what to do with Bond, Sosa, and McGuire, and that's a debate that really won't go away until they die.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And you brought up GSP. Now, I'm not throwing nobody's age out there, but you and GSP are the same age, I believe. And GSP has just made his return after maybe a 3-year hiatus. First of all, he ducked my homie Nate Diaz. So, I mean, Nick Diaz, I'm sorry. And pretty much got a fluke victory over, I forget what's his name, before he retired. But he did come back and he showed a lot of poise, and Michael Bisping talked hella trash, which the other thing I'm going to ask you, this is a 2-part question, because it seems that the trash talkers are the ones who sell all of a sudden. There's been a huge transition on marketing for UFC. The trash talkers, the heels, are the ones who are selling tickets. If it is not Brock Lesnar, who's, I believe, before Conor McGregor had the highest bag taken home from the UFC. So yeah, you have Conor McGregor, Brock Lesnar, Michael Bisping. I mean, all these huge trash talkers. But you have a guy who had a 3-year hiatus come back and reclaim his victory. Considering he's a legend and obviously one of the fan favorites, what does that do to you as a fan to see that happen?
I mean, I think it's awesome. Number one, I mean, also if you like follow GSP when he was fighting, it doesn't really surprise you that much. I mean, the guy was like obsessive in his training and studying his opponents and everything like that. So, I mean, I wasn't surprised that he won when he came back. But I don't think it's bad for the sport, even if he's not one of the highest pay-per-view buy type of guys. Like you said, he's a legend. I mean, he beat everybody at 170, literally. There was nobody left for him to fight that wouldn't have been a rematch. And two, like also the big thing was when people were talking about him and Anderson Silva doing a dream match or whatever, he was saying he would take a few years off to try to move up the weight class. So like that's probably a big part of the reason he took the time off in the first place, also to recover from everything he was doing to himself.
Yeah. And make movies,
but just to come back and show that resilience and even be able to show up and perform like that in the main event of a UFC pay-per-view in your first fight back after that many years off is like super impressive.
Yeah, because look, it never happens that way. I mean, BJ Penn tried it a billion times, and it just doesn't work.
Exactly. As far as the trash talkers, they do a good job of hyping fights and selling things, but at the same time, it's like there's a difference between Michael Bisping and Conor McGregor. Like Michael Bisping talks a lot of trash, he riles his opponents up, and like it works for him a lot of times, but sometimes it doesn't work. Just like with GSP.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor, so far, everything he said he's going to do, he's pretty much gone out there and done it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Outside of the one time he lost to Nate Diaz, when he went in probably too cocky, underestimated his opponent, which I don't know why you would underestimate that guy's grappling. That's not
even that. The guy's cardio is amazing. He's an amazing striker in his chin. He wanted to stand up with this guy. Come on now. You know, he did that fight one day after doing the triathlon. So, you know, I'm just going to hype my favorite fighter right there. The brothers.
So. Nate Diaz is the man. Both the Diaz brothers are awesome.
Yeah.
And just speaking of trash talkers, they're two of the best trash talkers as well. And they do a good job of getting in guys' heads. You know what I'm saying? I would say their win-loss record is probably more impressive than Michael Bisping's, but I also say they probably do better as far as drawing numbers than he does too.
I just had to say, like, it brought a tear to my eye from your promo, which we'll talk about later on. Of you quoting "Don't be scared, homie." I was like, oh, he quote my man. All right, now I promise this is my last MMA question because I know I'm bored. Jamal, John Jones is one of my favorites of all time. I mean, could you just? Everybody knows the guy. Everybody knows what he's done, and the disappointment, and even Dana White calling him one of the most disappointing fighters of all time. What do you feel about this guy and everything he's been through over this last 3 years?
Yeah. Part of me feels bad for him. Just because, like, I know how it is when you can be your own worst enemy. But it's also like he's come out in the public and half the time he's apologized and felt apologetic and says he regrets some of the stuff. And then half the time he comes out and is like, nah, I don't feel bad. But I would say the fact that you keep messing up shows that you don't really feel bad about any of it. Yeah. Especially when it's like you try to cover up a lot of the stuff or some of the things you're like, you deflect at first, like, nah, it's this. But it always, like, the truth is always going to come out. If something happens, just admit to it. Like, you'll be a lot better off than this constant denial of everything. Yeah. So, I mean, it is disappointing, especially because, too, like, kids, you would think, would consider him to be a role model. And it's like when they see him reacting like that, too, that doesn't set a good example for them. Yeah. So it's just kind of disappointing, like you said, and a lot of other people have said. Not that, in my opinion, there's not a lot of athletes out there that either are good role models or they don't get the credit that they deserve. Like there's a lot of guys that do a lot of charity and things like that. But you only hear about a lot of the politically tied stuff nowadays.
That's very true. Yeah.
That's a whole nother discussion, though.
All right, so again, everybody who's just tuned in and everything, we have John Kermon of Capital MMA of Nova Pro, the Cagezilla Ironman Award for 2016, based on his dedication, consistency, and reliability. So we just covered a lot of MMA thoughts and background on that. So we're going to transition into talking about wrestling because this guy's a Swiss Army blade. He is both a professional independent wrestler and a professional MMA fighter. So let's I want to clear this up because I know I'm gonna quote this wrong. If I'm not mistaken, you started off in professional wrestling. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that is built back to 2014. So I would just like to know not sort of say what got you into it, but I'm more or less curious as to how did you get into professional wrestling, and then when went off in your head and say, all right, I'm not totally content with this. I'm about to start training MMA.
So I actually started wrestling in 2000. That's when I started wrestling school. Like 2004 is when I started branching out a little more. From 2000 to then, I did a lot of just local shows.
Oh, and if I can ask one favor too, if you can definitely, as you talk about this journey a little bit, I know you have a lot of friends and a lot of people that you've trained throughout this journey as well too. If you definitely can mention that as well too.
All right, I'll try. But I started in 2000. It was just something I always wanted to do from a kid, like most people that get into it, I think. And so in 2000, I searched wrestling schools. I found the closest one to me, and it was an hour away from where I lived. But like, I remember by that time Mick Foley's book had come out, and he was talking about how he had driven hours and hours to go to wrestling school and do wrestling training. So I was like, 1 hour is nothing.
Which book was that?
It was his first one, I think. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of it. But I signed up the first time I went there. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I know I want to try it at least to see if I can do it. But it was kind of hard for me to pick up some of the things, but I picked things up pretty quickly, and I had my first match after just a few months, like 3 or 4 months. But I had also kind of given myself a timeline of 10 years to try to do something in it. So when I got to that 10-year mark, I decided then, let me try something different. I didn't know what I wanted to do really, and I was like, well, I'll try this mixed martial arts stuff, which a lot of times people will say is kind of a crazy thing to do, but at the same time, it's kind of like we only have one life to live, and I'd rather try things while I can, all the potential things that could go good or go wrong, and try to battle myself about it and waste a lot of time. So after 10 years, I switched to MMA. But starting out, I had learned from a lot of different people. One thing I was always taught was to travel as much as you could, to learn as much as you could from everybody. And I was lucky at the time to be going to a lot of places. I wasn't really doing shows with them, but I went to a lot of CZW shows and places like that where I'm able to, even if you're not wrestling, you can still learn stuff. You know what I mean? Just from watching the show or watching people talk about their matches. You can kind of figure stuff out that way as well. And a lot of that was thanks to Sanjay Dutt, who I trained with. I'm sure you see him commenting on my Facebook a lot.
you guys are definitely BFFs, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then, around 2007 or so, the gym we trained at, Kaida Pro Wrestling, they had reopened and they needed someone to run the training school, and I was doing that at that time. And there's been, there's a lot of people that come in and out of wrestling all the time. There's some people that come for like 3 weeks and they quit. There's some people that stick with it and make it pretty far. A lot of the people that I trained at that time, not very many of them are still wrestling at this time. But the few that are, I would say, are doing great. But I trained Nala Rose. And again, this is just teaching them the basics and how to start out and everything like that. It's not like I taught them everything they know. I just helped them start out.
You're such a humble guy.
But Nala Rose is one of them. Huh?
I say you're such a humble guy.
No, it's true though, because I think about, my own journey when I think about this kind of thing. And it's like, well, a lot of the stuff I figured out on my own.
Yeah.
So I can't really take credit for anybody else's success. People still have to go out there and do everything on their own. Yeah. I didn't hold anybody's hand through all of this. I also trained Logan Easton LaRue. I helped train him. I helped train Mia Yim, a name I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And just like, again, countless other people. A lot of them aren't wrestling nowadays. Those are the three that do it the most consistently, though. And now I'm really aware still out there and doing stuff. If there's other people, I'm just not 100% sure, really.
Awesome. Jamal?
Yeah, this sounds good. Now, coming up in the December, you and Dominic Guarini, another big MMA guy, the Bone Collector, as it were, are going to have a no ropes match. Now, obviously, the wrestling ring and what you do and everything is predicated on the fact that there are boundaries, that separate, the inside and outside of the ring, the audience from, just that goes out the window. How does that change your mindset, your preparation for going into a match that, could spill out into the audience?
It excites me. One thing too with that, though, there's going to be no rope breaks. So, if I get him in a submission, what's he going to do to get out of it? He's going to have good defense. The defense is going to have to be on point. But it's also, to that degree, it's something I'm sure it's been done before, but not anything I can be aware of or that I'm aware of or that people talk a lot about. So to me, that kind of gives us a chance to maybe set this match apart from a lot of other matches.
I've definitely not heard of it in the U.S., but outside of like sumo or wrestling in India, traditional wrestling there, where it's just ring out and then you're done. But this is going to be the closest thing to like a real life like virtual fighter or Tekken match that
right. Yeah, I don't know if we lose if we get knocked off. I don't know if those are the rules. I kind of hope not, because I'd like for it to get a little wild. But I also assume it's not going to be your traditional wrestling rules. There's going to be probably a lot of strikes thrown. I imagine punches will be legal. Kicks are already illegal, so I'm not really worried about that. But I just know that this thing's definitely going to be a fight between the two of us.
So
now, one question out of the way: when you're in the wrestling ring, and a lot of pro wrestling is part athleticism, moveset, and that type of deal, and charisma and interacting with the crowd. In MMA, you guys were going on a lot about the biggest trash talkers and stuff like that. Do you think that the kind of the pro wrestling aspects of MMA and the way it's the things are hyped and on matches that you have the biggest trash talkers now that is a category? What does that do for the legitimacy of a sport? Because when you're selling tickets based on hype and not actual substance in the ring or in the octagon or whatever the hell prison tesseract it is, what does that do? Does it take away from the legitimacy of the sport where it just become more fluff and hype instead of actual? They don't need to talk. They want to get in the ring, and one dude's not going to walk out.
Right. It can. It kind of depends. Like UFC is in a spot right now where they're going to kind of find that out because a lot of the guys now are trying to talk trash. And like I said earlier, there's a difference between like Conor McGregor and Michael Bisping. Conor McGregor talks trash, and then the trash that he talks, he goes and he delivers in the octagon. That's kind of what really separates him from everybody else.
Chael Sonnen talks so much trash, and I don't think he's won a fight in the last 10 years.
No, he talked all that trash, and he embarrassed himself the second time he fought Anderson Silva, and he never came close to a main event again, I don't think. So it's like sometimes the trash talkers do talk their way into, opportunities a little too fast. And it kind of depends on the division too. Like 185 at that time, there's really not a lot of people for Anderson Silva to fight. But it's like a lot of these guys that are trying to talk trash now, if they're not even close to the top 10, like I'd even say top 5, they're kind of wasting their time. Like you have to win big fights right now in UFC to kind of move ahead. So just talking trash isn't really working out for guys as much as I think people think it is. It just depends on really who's delivering at the time more than anything.
Fair enough. Do you think that though that this is a thing that should continue? And I'm trying to differentiate between like the worked wrestling match and the legitimate deal. Do you think we've seen a lot of these things where the worlds kind of collide? Ronda Rousey's been showing up at NXT events and stuff like that, and she was in the ring at WrestleMania a couple years ago, and we were seeing pro wrestlers go over to MMA and do their thing there for better or worse. Are these worlds eventually going to absorb each other and come into like one nuanced thing? Should that happen, or is it kind of like back to Nova Pro where the two things aren't mutually exclusive?
Yeah. I don't think it'll ever become a thing where they become blended. I think they'll always borrow aspects from each other, specifically with MMA, like the trash talking and the hyping, which I actually think is kind of a good thing because it makes people excited to see the fight. Every time people talk about, the people that don't sell fights as the guys that don't ever say anything, and they're fighting another guy who doesn't say anything. So it's kind of like when it's just two guys talking about how they respect each other, you're just kind of like, all right, yeah, that's cool. That you have no real extra incentive to watch that fight necessarily, unless it's like two guys who are, just wrecking people on a regular basis in their prime. So I don't really necessarily think it's a bad thing. And I think, again, it's good that there's a lot of MMA crossover in wrestling right now because it brings a lot of legitimacy to wrestling, which, like I said before, people were complaining about. And again, I think it's making people bring their level up in athleticism and the things they do in the ring overall. So I think it's a good thing. I don't think they'll ever be, again, totally absorbed with each other. But I think the crossover has benefited both to even at the highest level with Brock and everything like that. I remember that brought, both things were talked about on SportsCenter. He's talked about on SportsCenter time he fights. So it's good exposure for both companies whenever that happens.
Yeah, he went from returning to SummerSlam to fighting Mark Hunt, and again, at the time, receiving the UFC's highest bag. So yeah, it worked. I mean, the guy again had, I don't know how long his hiatus was, but he came back and he brought in sales like no other.
Yeah.
So you know, Bellator and TNA, if that's even still a joint thing anymore. I mean, you had people like Bobby Lashley and maybe King Mo doing it as well too. And at a point, I thought like, all right, this is back. This is like crazy. Like this is not going to work. But again, it did prove, which is, you know, they don't get a lot of credit for it, but it does prove that, you know, you can have a successful career in MMA, which Bobby Lashley did. He couldn't be beat at a point, and then he goes back and wrestles for TNA and has a very good career, which he's still with as well now too. So you know, I thought like, you know, Vince McMahon was quoted back before, like, you know, they'll never work together because, you know, Dana White, I'm sorry, was quoted before that, hey, you know, we're not going to do that because we're not going to, like, you know, take the legitimacy from our sports. But at the end of the day, if it's not wrestling, if it's not MMA, everybody's just trying to make money by all means. So
yeah. And the thing too is like in MMA, you can't question legitimacy because one guy's gonna win, one guy's gonna lose. Like they're fighting for real. You know what I'm saying? And it's like people talk about a lot of these fights and ask if they're worked and things like that. It's like you can, number one, you can tell. Number two, if it ends with one person being unconscious, when's the last time you heard of somebody in wrestling agreeing to being knocked unconscious?
and I mean, now you take it now to the third combat sport and being boxing, and now you look at what may be considered, I'm sorry, I mean, maybe it fell a little bit under the Pacquiao Mayweather, but still it made a ton of money from Conor McGregor doing his first professional boxing match against Floyd Mayweather, and it absolutely broke like the boxing or just combat sports world. So again, it's all about money at the end of the day. But actually, now that I bring that out, what do you think about Conor's performance in that boxing fight?
I mean, it was good. You know what I'm saying? He kind of fell into Floyd's plan of working a little too hard at the beginning. And just from like my cornerman, he holds pads for a pro boxer in the DC area from time to time. And he's told me that he punches harder than anybody else that he's ever held pads for, even like the heavyweight MMA guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a difference in the punching from boxing to mixed martial arts. That's really, to me, is the biggest difference. I mean, in MMA or even just Muay Thai kickboxing, you have to be a little lighter on your feet. In boxing, you can plan a little more and punch a little harder. So when you start on that base, I would say you definitely know how to punch harder. So to me, like, Conor was landing a lot of punches, especially in the early rounds. But a lot of times when he landed him, I felt like I saw Floyd smiling.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, well, he's not hitting him hard enough. Yeah. And the thing, too, is, like, even from having boxing guys come into the gym and seeing them spar, like, for them, sparring is just all-out war. I mean, they're fighting every time. They just have headgear on is the biggest difference. But it's like I always see them with busted noses and busted lips and things like that. So if Conor's not sparring like that for his fight, then it's kind of like, you know, to me, he just didn't have the real boxing fundamentals necessarily to beat a Floyd Mayweather. But at the same time, he was in there for all those rounds with, you know,
the greatest.
A guy people will say is the best boxer of all time.
Yeah, I always said it's like, you know, an and one mixtape basketball player trying to play LeBron one-on-one. But you know what?
Right, yeah.
The one thing I will say about that fight is just that I thought he had a great game plan. I mean, obviously Vegas judges cannot be trusted. So if you go and make at least the first 6 rounds very interesting, then you have a chance of throwing the whole fight.
Yeah. And I mean, he definitely had a lot of output. He was throwing a lot of punches.
Yeah.
Like the whole time.
That's how I thought his game, you know, he said, you know, to go into 12 rounds was hard. He lost in the 10th round or 9th round. And you know, for his game plan of what he did, he executed it, but he just went against the person who I consider is the best boxer of this time, and Floyd Mayweather, who just adjusted maybe 3 times in a match his game plan, and Conor didn't have anything. It's like the brawling wasn't going to work in much longer for him.
Oh, nah.
So
I mean, he was very composed, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying, which was good because if he came out there being wild, he definitely would have probably got knocked out.
yeah. That goes a lot like that goes unheard of. Nobody's really talking about that. Everybody's talking about he's going to go out there and throw kicks. Like, come on now, the guy was all about his money as well too. And for his first fight, he actually may have put on a better fight than I've seen a lot of other people who fought Floyd Mayweather. So
yeah, he definitely hit him a lot more times than a lot of people.
So I know you say you like wrestling, traditional wrestlers better. But you did fight last year, in which I watched online. You fought Matt Riddle, who also has a sort of say of a upbringing as yours as well too. So how do you go into preparation for a match like that, considering who Matt Riddle is on the indie scene, and knowing that you may not be able to bring something new to a match that he's never seen?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing, he's a little bigger than me too, so it's kind of like there's a few challenges with that. Obviously, the biggest one being that he's going to know what I'm trying to do most of the time. But at the same time, if he's going to try, when he incorporates his MMA stuff, I also know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And kind of what I alluded to earlier a little bit as well, being a smaller guy, there's different moves I can do that maybe he can't do. So I would say that's really my biggest advantage, is being able to work into positions that he can't necessarily either get into or might not even be familiar with seeing, depending on if he trains with smaller guys a lot or not. But it was a match I definitely enjoyed. And the mental preparation, I guess, is a little different too, just because it's a guy that's fought before. So again, I just have to go in understanding that he's going to know a lot of what I'm trying to do. But also be aware that he might try to do a lot of the same things back. So he's going to be pretty much equally as dangerous as me. At least when it comes to the grappling game and everything like that. I might try to even go a little more traditional pro wrestling style against someone like him, just to try to throw him off his game.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, then if you're going to get somebody who has more of an MMA background, you go back to your wrestling background, because you feel like that may be the element of surprise. Where vice versa, in some of these guys that you faced in Nova Pro this year, I mean, you went undefeated up until you met Tim Dunst, we will talk about in a second. But I mean, you beat the likes of Chip Day, Roy Gulak, Fred Yehi, which was an amazing match. Tracy Househouse Williams, and then you even have a win with Dominic Guarini earlier within the year. So out of the 5 of those guys, 2 of them do have an MMA background, but Fred Yehi is absolutely a grappling machine, and to see you like wow him or completely catch him by surprise is the appreciation that I don't think the fans are actually getting. Which I from the comment I was going to say earlier, where you have some of the fans say, "Oh, John Kermon is boring." So before I even say any more on that, what will be your direct response to fans who says that your matches are boring?
That's fine if they think they're boring. Like, I don't really care. Wrestling is supposed to be a mix of everything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to give my opinion on it, maybe a match or a character or something that I don't like. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean nobody likes it. Obviously, there's an appeal to my matches because I think they do get a positive reaction for the most part. And it's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me if people think that or say that. Even if people boo or cheer me at the matches, like, I mean, obviously I want a reaction, you know what I'm saying? But even if they're going to start booing me, that's okay. I might not be for everybody. But I'm still going to go out there and do my thing because, again, I think it's just different from what a lot of other people do. And that's really kind of the point of wrestling, is to try to bring something different to the table.
Right, but earlier, when we started on, that's what we were talking about earlier. It was kind of like there was just no reaction. It was elaborate quiet in there. And then now, you're one of the bigger guys. So do you think that obviously you've done something to connect with the audience, to connect, whether it's through your matches, whether it's different opponents, or bringing something. You're definitely bringing something you weren't originally in Nova Pro, and the crowd is definitely responding to that. how important do you think that is in the wrestling sense? Because in the MMA sense, the only person that you should be considered focused on is your opponent. Whereas in wrestling, it is still your opponent and the audience that may or may not be working with or against you as well.
And if I can add something to that too, the likes of everyone you've beat at Nova Pro aren't considered homegrown Nova Pro talent. The people you have lost to has been people such as, you know, like Logan Sorrell. I know it was a dirty finish, but Tim Donks, who's absolutely another home favorite. Which the only common denominator I'm seeing here is that these are talent that people are overly with no matter what, where you do have a split crowd with you. So as Jamal said, do you feel that this one factor of not having the complete cooperation and backing up the crowd may have to do something with the finishes of your matches?
Nah, I don't think it has anything to do with the finishes. I just think it has to do, again, with my style. I mean, a lot of it too is just like all of my moves aren't necessarily the biggest or fanciest. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, a lot of times, really, what I prefer to do is wait for the other guy to try to do something fancy and then try to reverse him on it.
Yeah.
Which doesn't always get the biggest reaction, depending on kind of, you know, what happens or where it ends up or anything like that. I think for me, really, when I started again gaining momentum, I guess there's a few different things. Again, I think a lot of people didn't know what to make of me. I remember a lot of times in the early reviews of shows, if I saw them online, they would say something like I was a guy with an MMA gimmick. But I think once people maybe started finding out more about me, like the fact that I actually fight, I'm not just the guy with the MMA gimmick. You know, like that's obviously going to get you a little bit of respect. And again, like you said, I'm a homegrown talent. I'm a Nova Pro guy, like Nova Pro, and then there's one other place that I wrestle for in New Jersey. Those are the only two places I wrestle.
Capital?
So I think that helps me connect with the people in that way, because they're really seeing like their own home-based talent come up and face these big challenges and having these matches that deliver, and knowing that really that's the only place you can go to see them, I think is kind of endearing as well.
Yeah, and the promotion in New Jersey, speaking of, is Capital Wrestling, which you've been up there and faced Jeff Cannonball, which was a 3-part saga, if I'm not mistaken, as well too.
Yeah.
So again, you're no stranger to fighting people much bigger than you.
Right. Yeah.
So okay, so two comments from the things you said. Number one, and to the fans that's listening, and I religiously promote this when we do the kickoff show for Nova Pro. Like, look, if you like Kermon and you don't, the guy has beat some of the top talent to ever walk through the doors of Nova Pro. And MMA, if anybody who's unclear by now, stands for mixed martial arts. And the key word here is arts. For everybody may not understand what Picasso mind may have been when he was writing or drawing on a board. But down the line, a lot of people appreciate it. And then it started to gross a lot of money as well. So no matter if you're appreciating what you're seeing right now, I advise you to get on board before it's too late, because that just seems to be the common thing with arts. And you just say, like, with guys with their fancy move, these counters that you do are like unheard of. And I can say this with great deal of confidence, that some of the stuff that you're doing in there, these hybrid, you know, martial arts and wrestlers aren't doing it at all. They're not doing it.
Thanks,
they're not showing you what you see in the octagon in the wrestling ring and saying like, oh no, I got to completely like vanilla this out because this is wrestling. No, you're like, no, I would absolutely do this in the octagon too.
Yeah.
and the only thing which I asked you when we talked at the end of the last show is, considering what wrestling is, considering what MMA is, and you could correct me if I'm wrong with the terminology with this as well too. When you're in that octagon, your mind has to be on kill. So how do you get into the square circle and you turn that kill trigger off? However, you find yourself in the same predicaments, because I told you before, like, considering who you are, when I seen you near that rear naked choke that Dominic Guarini had you on, like I stood up, I was like, oh shit, this is over. Consider like, but you stayed calm and you legitimately got out of it, like no kayfabe at all. Like you legitimately got out of it. But I just want to know, how do you, again, which may be more in a desperate situation in the octagon, but in this square circle, what's the demeanor? What's the mindset considering that?
So I mean, anytime that I'm going into a fight, I know the other dude across the way from me is coming to hurt me. 100%. Like he's trying to knock me unconscious or choke me. Most of the time, trying to knock you unconscious. Everybody wants that highlight real knockout. In wrestling, it's a lot more gamesmanship. You're trying to one-up each other. So it's kind of a little different. Wrestling, you get more time to feel out the opponent in the crowd and everything like that. It's not necessarily about going in there and trying to destroy each other all the time. That's really the biggest difference, I would say. Again, fighting is just like, and then fighting is a little more competitive. As far as like, you're trying to prove yourself a little more. Not that you're not trying to prove yourself in wrestling. That's kind of the whole point as well, is to prove that, you're worthy of being in these big spots and everything like that. But you do it in different ways. It's not just about your in-ring performance. You have to do other stuff too, like connecting with the crowd and, having them request to see you fight big matches and things like that. Whereas MMA, you just go out there and if you keep winning, like you're just going to keep doing better no matter what. It's not always that way in wrestling.
Yeah. Jamal?
That sounds good. Now, Thanksgiving's coming up. You got the show on Black Friday, the 11th Dimension. Talk about a little bit about your opponent for the show, and then of course that leads into the no ropes match on December 28th versus Dominic Guarini. Well, the first thing, the no ropes match. Is this it? Is this the end? Is this like the last stand for you two? You've had quite the feud over the last couple of months, and you called him out, and he accepted, and now it is what it is. Just before New Year's. So how does that no matter what happens, win, lose, or draw, where do you guys go from here?
I mean, as long as he doesn't try to do anything, try to pull any sleight of hand or anything like that, try to do anything tricky, I assume it'd be the end. Again, I assume this match is going to be violent. We're going to beat each other. It's not necessarily going to be like our past matches where we've gone in there and kind of felt each other out with some grappling first. I think we're just going to show up and fight. At least that's my intent. So, I mean, I don't see where we could go beyond this.
Right.
Again, unless some kind of trickery is involved or something like that. I assume this is going to be it for us.
Now, do you think, well, not do you think, is there still a level of respect there? You guys have traded wins and losses. You kind of felt each other out for a while now. You kind of know what the other guys are thinking. There's got to be a little bit of gamesmanship in that. And not just, it's not going to turn into a tournament of death. But, because you have to prepare, because you can't take a guy like Guarini for granted, and you as well. It still has to be a level of respect there, even though you guys want to beat the absolute hell out of each other.
Yeah, I mean, I respect any man that's going to agree to face me because I don't think it's ever a good idea. But yeah, there is. I mean, he's also done his time on the mats and in training and everything like that. I'm going to respect that, of course. But that doesn't mean that I respect him more than I respect myself. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So when it comes down to it and we show up, I expect myself to be the better athlete and the better fighter that day. It's just the way it is. And while I do respect him, I definitely don't respect him more than I respect myself and my own skills.
Of course
so
not.
Definitely, like I said, I expect that day we're going to show up, we're going to fight, but I kind of already think I know what the outcome is going to be.
On the MMA side of things, when is your next professional bout?
I don't have one set right now. The end of the year is kind of a slow time for fighting. There was one card I could have potentially got on in December, but they were filled up by the time I contacted them. So probably early next year, maybe January or February. But there will be announcements and stuff when I do that on my Facebook and my Instagram.
And should be Twitter, but we're not going to go there. The fact that you don't have a Twitter.
No. I don't need to hear a lot of negative stuff, man. That's all that's on Twitter is people talking.
All I'm saying is somehow, some way, Logan has one now. So if Logan can get one who was completely against it as well too, you definitely can get one.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Yeah. So again, you have Wheeler, Utah coming up for 11th Dimension, which is going to be Black Friday, and then you have the no rope match, which could end up anywhere inside the arena that night against Dominique Guarini, which is going to be at Such Great Heights, which is going to be on December 28th. So 2 matches we'll be looking forward to. Fan of yours, again, people, look, they're not on board. I don't care. I've never been a person that likes to be in the popular crowd. So despite the people like it or don't like it, I know what's right. And I know the way to go on this one. So a couple of other things just before we get out of here. I watched you in a news interview, which was for VOA News, in which you did they did an interview, and I guess they spoke towards your kickboxing and MMA background, which was a French broadcast. Now I would love to know how was this booked? How did you get to that, and what was the experience like?
It was actually it was broadcast in Africa. I'm not sure which country exactly, but there's a few French-speaking countries in Africa.
Right.
Yeah, so it was broadcast there for VOA Voice of America. They just contacted me out of the blue and asked me if I could come in. Their studios in DC. I live in DC, so obviously it's a natural matchup right there.
Yeah,
and even if I was supposed to be working or something like that, things like that I always try to take advantage of. So I told them, right away, even before thinking about my schedule at all, just because, it's not every day you get to do something like that.
Yeah.
But it was pretty awesome. I mean, it was in a real TV studio and everything like that. So it was really cool to do. The people on the show were awesome. They were all super nice and everything like that. And I was on TV in Africa. That's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Jamal, did you have any closing questions for our final remarks?
Oh, I'm also in DC too, so it's amazing how many little things you wind up seeing and getting into on every corner. But I think I'm good. I just obviously it's something that we need to talk to you about for a while. We definitely want to get your thoughts on the whole Conor McGregor thing and how well that worked out. But for you, man, your stock is definitely going up at Nova Pro, and whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I think the audience finally smartened up, as it comes around to what the Kermonator does. But the no ropes match is going to be certainly something. Personally, as a photographer, thank God there's going to be no ropes because they always get in my damn way. So,
that's so funny.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something I didn't think of.
Yeah, I'm always okay with that. But it will be interesting to see how different the match is from a wrestling standpoint, because you kind of base your surroundings based on the ropes, based on the turnbuckle, based on how close you are. It's a game of inches, and if you're locked down in a submission move and stuff like that, a lot of offense is generated by springing off the ropes and stuff. And it will be interesting where it just kind of expands into infinity. So that's definitely one of the more interesting matches that I've heard of this year, along with the triathlon match. We'll have Michael on Tuesday to talk about what exactly shenanigans he's cooking up in his crock pot there.
Yeah.
But John, man, it's been a great time talking to you.
Yeah, no, thanks guys for having me on. It's a blast. I had a really good time, and anytime you want to have me on, I'm more than welcome to come back.
Awesome, man. Yeah, definitely look forward to it. I just sparked the question in my head real quick because I'm thinking about this no rope match real quick. So I understand that there's a VA fight committee or athletic committee which governs wrestling.
Yeah, athletic commission.
Okay. Do they also govern MMA as well?
Yeah, they do. They have two different people overseeing each one. I'm pretty sure though.
So you blood can be drawn in the octagon, but just not in the wrestling match, right? I'm not wishing blood on anybody, but I'm just wondering, is that true?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And then one other thing I was thinking earlier before I was preparing for the show, and how recent did MMA become not legalized, but or is that the correct term? Or when did it actually become legal to hold MMA events in Virginia?
That I'm actually not sure on. And it's funny, Virginia, the wrestling commission, they don't allow a lot of things. Like you said, you can't bleed in Virginia.
Right.
A lot of that is because there's no blood testing for wrestling. There's blood testing for MMA. That's why it's not a problem for MMA, but it's a problem for wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
But there's that. Oh, damn, I forgot my point. But the wrestling commission in Virginia is like, at this point, they're not existing. They used to be real stringent on everything and show up at all the shows and make sure people weren't breaking the rules and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of stopped showing up. For MMA, they're always there for everything. And I mean, the commissions, it just like, it kind of depends. State to state, they're different. Oh, this is the point. MMA too, in amateur, you can have, like, they have full professional rules. So you can elbow people and knee people in the head and things like that. A lot of other states, you can't do that in MMA at the amateur level. Which, I mean, depending on what you plan on doing, can be good or bad. I think it's a good thing, being that I went pro, to have the pro rules the whole time.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, in places like Pennsylvania, you have to wear, like, shin guards, and if it goes to the ground, you can't punch the person on the ground. I think you can only do, like, grappling stuff.
See, I always like to draw parallels. This is like the Lonzo Ball treatment, where he had a good three in college, but now that the 3-point line has moved back in the NBA, he's struggling badly to hit it.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, I saw something where he has like one of the worst shooting percentage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but to be fair, he's not facing Dwayne Wade and Kyrie Irving in college. You know, I mean, there is no equivalent to Mount St. Mary's in the NBA.
Right.
It's top level competition every single time.
He still has to shoot the ball regardless if he's regardless.
Yeah, he's supposed to be one of those top guys.
Yeah. So again, I hate to put you on the spot, but two other things. Number one, do you have any remarks for Willa Utah or Dominique Guarini going into your next two matches that you would like to say, and or anything to the Noah Pro fans who still are like, oh, he's boring, blah blah blah? Do you have a quick, 30 seconds of things to say to address any of those issues?
To Dominic, I'll see you in December. I hope you're ready to catch his beating. To Wheeler, I'll say sorry. You're just kind of in the way between me and Dom, so you're going to catch a beating. To the Nova Pro fans that don't like me, keep showing up to the shows. Keep buying tickets. You know what I'm saying? Keep coming out and supporting.
John Kermon, ladies and gentlemen, where can they find you on social media? Mine is your Twitter that doesn't exist.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Kermonator. It's Kermonator. Facebook, just John Kermon, my name. Those are the only two things I'm on right now. I don't really do any of the other stuff.
And if anybody wants to get that firsthand training, where do they find you at?
Oh, the capitalmma.com. There's a place where you can submit your information if you're interested in training or anything like that. If you want to come out and see me fight in Northern Virginia, I have fought for Strike Off in the past. I don't know when their next show might be, but hopefully I'll be on it. Other than that, you can just kind of pay attention to my social media to see what else I have coming up outside of Nova Pro.
Yeah, if you are at home and you want to start sweating, sitting on your couch, watches Facebook videos because the consistent amount of training, I be thinking I'm working out at the same time. So again, ladies and gentlemen, John Kermon of Capital MMA of Nova Pro, because you know that's his home. But yes, he does wrestle other places too. But we're claiming him as our home, as so of Nova Pro. One of the nicest guys in the world, one of the baddest MFs out there. So good luck to anybody who decides to step in the octagon or the square circle with him. Kermon, we appreciate you coming on, and like you said, we will be doing this again for sure.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I had a lot of fun.
Not a problem. And everybody that's joining and listening today, I appreciate y'all listening. We'll catch you guys Tuesday, which we will have Mike King, promoter and founder of Nova Pro, getting ready to promote the 11th Dimension show coming up Black Friday. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.